Welcome everybody to this wonderful opportunity to chat, and of course I have to start by recognizing that today is the longest day, so we have plenty of daylight to achieve everything that we need today. So hopefully we're gonna use that to achieve everything that we wanted to do today. But more importantly, I'd like to thank all of you because everything that we're going to talk about today is really as a result of your support and your trust in us, in our organization, and of course your involvement in driving us towards achieving our mission. And really, our mission has not changed over the years. It is to achieve a world that is free of MECFS, and in order to do that, our objectives are to make this disease better recognized, diagnosable, and ultimately treated and cured. And these are all of the things that all of us want to achieve. I wanted to reflect for a moment on the year that's passed. I joined just about a year ago as the president and CEO of Solve, and this was obviously a monumental year for all of us going through the COVID-19 pandemic. And in many ways, those things connected in some unexpected ways, at least for me. So I think some of you know that I had spent the majority of my career working on the development of therapies for people who are affected by rare genetic diseases. And I was introduced to Solve in the early part of last year. And one of the most important things that happened as a result of that for me personally was that getting to understand MECFS helped me to finally understand what was impacting my sister for many years. And of course, that became very personal. And I wanted to see how I could apply my experience, my skill set, and really bring that to this world of MECFS, which is not a rare disease at all. The definition of a rare disease in the US is having a population of less than 200,000 people. And of course, we know that even before COVID, people who are affected by MECFS were much more than that, probably estimated to be about 2 million people. So MECFS is not a rare disease, but many of the characteristics that I've got to know over the years, the characteristics of rare diseases, which are typically don't have a lot of interest in terms of research, and frankly, no interest from industry to develop therapies. All of those actually apply to MECFS. And so these are some of the challenges that we're all facing. And the one thing that I didn't know when I joined, and I probably in retrospect I should have thought about it, but luckily many of you and many people on our team have thought about the connection between post-viral diseases and MECFS, and in that case the concern that COVID-19 would actually lead to another wave of people who are affected by a long impact of a post-viral disease that could really resemble MECFS. And unfortunately, that's exactly what has started to happen. And so I think we started to recognize that in the summer of last year. So by the time I joined, there was certainly the beginning of the understanding that some people that had COVID-19 just didn't recover. They didn't recover in the time frame that you'd expect them to recover. You know, the couple of weeks or maybe 4 weeks that it would take to clear the virus and be free of symptoms. And we started to hear about people that they didn't. and their stories were very, very similar to many of the stories that we know from our community of people with MECFS. And so we started to pay greater and greater attention to that. And actually, there was not a lot of interest initially, not from media, not from the mainstream medical establishment. Ultimately, I had the opportunity to co-author an op-ed with Tony Komarov, who obviously he has this extensive knowledge of post-viral diseases for probably 4 decades. And together we were looking at the concern at the time that we'll see a large number of people coming up with MECFS. And we actually had this op-ed published in The Guardian because there was not a lot of interest in any of the US-based media to talk about that. Of course, that had changed, all of that changed dramatically since then. And I think that we realized that that concern, unfortunately, is materializing. And as an organization, we felt that it's very important for us to therefore make some adjustments. And this was really mainly for 2 reasons. One is we were getting more and more concerned about a large number of people that have symptoms that are very much like MECFS, and we wanted to embrace that group, and also to spare them, if we could, some of the challenges that our community has experienced over the years, the disbelief, the inability to get to a correct diagnosis. These were things that, of course, we were very familiar with and were concerned about that. But there was another aspect of that, which is that from a scientific perspective, COVID-19 really represents a unique opportunity. And I always feel kind of strange to use the term opportunity in the context of this tragic pandemic. But again, from a scientific perspective, we now have an unparalleled opportunity to look at a large number of people who had the same infection, in this case COVID-19, and understand why do some of them recover and some don't. And this was always that period of time that, in the context of MECFS, in the past, we just really never had the opportunity to look at that window, this critical window of the first several months, maybe a year or 2 after the acute infection, in which potentially many of the changes or the impact on the immune system and other systems, that's when those changes occur. So that's why we felt that it's an important aspect of our work is to allow this kind of research to take place. And organizationally, that meant a few things for us to do, and we added them to our list of goals and objectives. And the first one was to make sure that there's awareness to that aspect of long COVID. And of course, we still don't know if this is exactly like what we would say is MECFS. And the truth is that we still don't know, but for us, that meant that that's the time to investigate that and really do the kind of research that would help us understand what is the connection, and are those diseases identical, similar, different, and in what ways. So we increased our efforts to advocate for federal money to go into this kind of research. And with others, we were very successful to get a little over $1 billion to the NIH for long COVID research. And those grants are actually just started to flow into research just in the last couple of weeks. And hopefully that's really going to give an incredible boost to our understanding of post-viral diseases, long COVID, and MECFS, and other diseases that are part of that group. And in addition to advocacy, we started to align some of our activities on the research side to also make sure that we can actually make the right efforts in the context of long COVID. And the first one was really related to the registry, the the UNME registry, and I have to say that this was one of the most exciting programs. When I just learned about SOLVE, I had the chance to really the wonderful opportunity to meet with Sadie. And in fact, I think that Sadie, you were the first person that I had met, and we talked about the registry and the vision for the registry, which at that time wasn't even formally launched. But Sadie and her team got the registry launched in the middle of last year, and very quickly started to pivot and allow for another path for people who had long COVID to be part of the registry. So this large database at this point is the largest of its kind that has very detailed information about both people with MECFS as well as long COVID. And Sadie will talk more about that and how that could be applied in future research. And the other part that that we also started to think about very carefully was how do we apply our research grant program, the Ramsay program, to allow for more research to be done in this unique setting. And that's really going to be the major part of what we're going to talk about today, is the Ramsay program. And so first of all, I'll stop here and really acknowledge the incredible contribution that all of you had to all of these programs, the advocacy part, the registry effort, and the Ramsay Grant Program. So again, deep gratitude to all of you for your support. And I'd like to really express a special thanks to Carol Head, who was the previous leader of SOLVE, and really all the things that we're talking about today. I really got a incredible foundation, Carol, during your time with the organization. So I'd like to transition now and introduce Sadie, Dr. Sadie Whittaker, who heads our research effort as the Chief Scientific Officer. And Sadie has had a long time vision for how research on MECFS could be enhanced to really support those goals of making the disease better recognized, diagnosed, and ultimately treated. So Sadie, without further ado, please go ahead.
So I think some of you know this is the 6th year of the Ramsay Grant Program. And we have the objectives are outlined here. So a primary focus of this program is to really build that MECFS workforce. So to build that pipeline of people who are coming into the field of MECFS and then they're staying there. So, you know, we do that by a couple of mechanisms. We do a lot of cold outreach to researchers who might be interested in certain aspects of mechanistic aspects of the disease, like an immunologist who's researching something in another area, for example. So we do a lot of outreach during the RFP period to people who don't currently work in the field. And then once people are in the network, we do a bunch of stuff to keep them engaged. So we connect people to each other. We share methods and findings within the group. And we really just try to do everything we can. We point them in the direction of new grants. We try to do everything we can to keep them in the field and feel like they're part of something. Because I do think as a researcher in any field, you want to feel like there's a path, number one, and you want to feel like you're part of a network. So, so that's the main focus of things we're trying to do. And we now have over 60 researchers in that network. So we're getting to a really substantial number, which is exciting. You guys know that we provide seed funding in these projects, and we really look at them to see, are they going to reveal something innovative, something that we haven't seen before? Does it seem aligned and building on previous research? And is it likely that the people doing the research will generate data that will be used to facilitate application for a bigger grant, like an NIH grant in the US or one of the big foundation grants in Europe, for example? Obviously, we want to add to the cumulative knowledge of the disease. And then we also have part of the kind of agreement that we have when we sign paperwork with Ramsay researchers is that they will use their research and to communicate about the disease, and that they can use it either for awareness building or for advocacy. You know, we provide template language if they wanted to reach out to policymakers or other people in the advocacy space. So knowing the power that research can have when you're speaking to people in government, we think this is a really great opportunity to have this network of advocates as part of the program. So this is a kind of a snapshot of all the different areas of research that we're focused on. So, you know, one of the questions, and I think Carol and I talked about this when I first onboarded as the CSO, is why aren't you focused on one particular area? Why don't you pick a horse and go deep there? It's, you know, it's a very reasonable question. My personal opinion is that we're just not there yet with this disease. There's lots of different scientific theories, which to my mind have credibility. And so our best bet for right now in terms of where the research landscape is to continue to focus in lots of different areas and start to build up a knowledge base in lots of different scientific areas. I'm hopeful, and I do believe there will come a point where we can double down and say, okay, actually, let's go here and let's really put all our money on this particular area. But for now, I believe this is the best opportunity we have for discovery. I mentioned we have over 60 people in networks, it's 62, and we funded 23 original research projects. One of the kind of unstated goals is, you know, about bringing people in and keeping them in the field. It's sometimes easier to do that when people are earlier in their career. So we have 17 early career researchers in the network, which I just think is really positive. If we can bring people in early and demonstrate to them that this is something that is worth their time and that they can build a career on this in this disease is really important. And then we have 12 researchers, again, who were from another field and brought their expertise into this field. And then we have 5 international collaborations. Some of the language in our RFA is really centered on collaborative thinking. And we actually have a call out for a collaborative grant proposal that encourages people to work together to solve different aspects of the disease. And then the pilot data generated from the Ramsay program has helped secure 7 large follow-on grants, including, can't even read the bottom of that, but NIH and some DOD. Since 2016, we've invested $833,000, and researchers have been able to gain over $7 million from large government funding. So, I mean, obviously, this is a huge return on investment, and it's exactly what we're trying to do with the program. It's bring people in, keep them in the field, allow them to generate pilot data and get big grants. And it just will continue to kind of fuel this pipeline and workforce for MECFS. So we couldn't be more pleased with where this has got to. So 2020 was a funny year for lots and lots of reasons, but it was a particularly challenging year for research. And the projects that were funded in 2020, all of them asked for a no-cost extension because nobody could get in the lab. And even people who could potentially get in the lab, or who did get in the lab towards the end of 2020, had problems in obtaining samples, seeing patients, etc. So really 2020 in terms of progress in the research space was delayed. All of those projects that were funded in that cycle will read out, but there's just going to be a delay in terms of those experiments. But we did have a number of publications, and they're highlighted here. So Bhupesh Prusti had published about impaired energy production in April of last year, and you see the tweet on the right. Bhupesh is actually also doing some long COVID research. So I think, that's just a really nice intersection where he's going to take a body of knowledge from MECFS and use that to help understand long COVID. Dr. Carmen Scheibenbogen from Berlin published their Ramsay findings in Frontier, also in April of 2020. And Shad Roundy published their pilot study, which was looking at a measure that he had developed about number of hours with feet on the floor. So those of you are probably familiar with that as Cindy Bateman's measure. It's her kind of big thing, that number of hours of feet on the floor is a really good measure of functionality. And so he created this sensor and associated algorithms to be able to measure that. So that's something that not only is really exciting in the terms of, his particular area of research, but it's something that we're talking to him about for integration into the registry. So some great publications. And like I said, we're hoping many more to come, but research definitely was delayed in 2020. For 2021, we had 2 types of grants available. The lab-based research grants for a 1-year period, that's kind of the traditional Ramsay program grant, so to speak. But we also, due to the growth of the registry that Oved mentioned in his introductory remarks, we have over 4,000 people in the registry and over 1 million data points. So we have a lot of information. So we had this opportunity to offer data-only grants, where we provided people an outline of what data fields we had available in the registry and encouraged people to submit grants which would just essentially analyze the data that we already have available. So this is an exciting area and one that I see growing in the future as we get more and more information and as we start to open the biobank and have that biological information alongside the patient-reported data. And the mechanism, the RFA closed, I think it was at the end of May or early June. And we had this massive increase in applications. So 87% increase over the previous cycle, 28 total applications received. We had 106 PIs and collaborators represented in the applications, 18 from long COVID study groups. Many of them are looking at the similarities and differences between long COVID and MECFS, and 65% from international groups. So thrilled with the response that we received in this cycle. And those applications are currently out at peer review right now, and we'll kind of have a better sense of which ones, we want to fund. I think the biggest challenge, honestly, for us with this volume, we normally fund between, I'd say, 6 and 8 proposals, right? And if you look at that, normally we receive about 12, we fund about 6 or 8. Based on the number of applications received, I think our biggest challenge is going to be picking which ones to fund. So exciting that so many people are interested, and we're hoping to fund as many as possible. So the Ramsay Grant Program in the future, like I said earlier, I see, at least for the next 3 years, the need to fund multiple different areas of science. I really see growing that research pipeline and that MECFS workforce as being absolutely key, and we'll continue not only to grow it, but to nurture and build that collaborative network among the individuals who we already have engaged. We will continue to fund lab-based research projects across that range of scientific modalities. I talked a little bit about this, about the UME registry and the growth that we're hoping to have with that. We're at 4,000. We're gaining about 50 additional people every week. So you can see how those numbers are just going to balloon. We also have, MECFS cohorts as well as long COVID cohorts. So we have that ability to compare across and look at similarities and differences and susceptibility and resilience to these long-term effects. And then what we're hoping to do in the next 1 to 2 years is launch this additional mechanism that's a little more translational. So it will look at target and pathway validation studies. So it'll take an existing kind of scientific mechanism that's already been published and look at, is there a drug that's already available, or is there a way that we can intervene in that pathway and start to move more towards translational medicine? So that's really exciting to me. I think the UME registry obviously is taking us in the direction of translational medicine, but this is even a step further. And we've seen this be successful in other disease groups. For example, the Michael J. Fox Foundation have this mechanism, and it's really allowed them to kind of take that step between the basic biology on one end and kind of clinical drug development you might see in pharma. This is that halfway step between the two. And I believe that is the end of the kind of overview. The next slide just talks about our social channels. I would encourage people to sign up for the registry if you haven't already. We also need healthy controls. So, you know, if you know somebody who might be interested in contributing their data and being part of the registry, we would really appreciate a referral. And you can learn more at youandmeregistry.com. And then these are our social channels. So You and Me Registry, you see there, and you know, if you follow us to get updates there. The next slide, I think, is our organization socials, where you can join our online community at Solve ME. And I imagine most of you are part of that community already if you're on this call. And I think that's it. We think we can go to questions. I think there's one more slide maybe that we could leave up whilst we field questions.
So the first question we have for you today comes from Carol Head. And she asked Sadie, what impact do you think the registry will have on the research landscape?
So I'll caveat this by saying, obviously, I'm biased, but I think it'll be transformative, right? If you have seen what these big data sets have done in other diseases, you know, they've allowed us to take cancer as one disease and then break it down into, you know, hundreds of different diseases, all with different causes and pathways that have been interrupted or changed. And that's really then led to specific targeted drugs, which have been able to treat very specific cancers. That's what I think is possible with the registry and MECFS. We get enough information, we'll be able to really understand different subtypes, what's driving the disease in certain people, but maybe not in others. And then importantly, what treatments are working for people and what treatments and why they're working for people. You know, we collect information on what treatments they're taking or have taken in the past and whether they've worked. And I just think that's going to be incredibly elucidating as we get more and more information. Obviously, for the Ramsay program, this is a huge data set and patient samples, etc., that we can pass along to researchers that's ready made. So in terms of being able to like attract people to the field, it's much easier sell, right? There isn't any barriers. We have information. I can tell you just anecdotally, some of you may know that we engaged UCLA a year ago. UCLA historically had not done any MECFS research. We were able to, through conversations with their Iris Cantor Women's Center, have MECFS included as part of their granting mechanism. And the first question, as we were, they were evaluating our eligibility to be part of that mechanism, was, do you have data? Do you have a registry? Do you have patient samples? Because it just changes the whole approach to research if you have information that you can provide to researchers.
Great, thank you. And the next one is for Oved, and it comes from Teme Ring. And Teme would like to know, is there an area of research results showing the most potential for treatment?
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a great question, and actually, will be interesting to see how Sadie answers that question. And we may have different opinions, which is part of science, of course. I think that in my mind, there are a couple of areas that are very promising. One is really to understand some of the genetic basis for aspects of MECFS, and Sadie mentioned a publication last year from Carmen Scheinborg in Germany, who is a Ramsay recipient, and her work indicated there are some specific changes that are genetically based in response in the immune response of people with MECFS, and you could see that those changes were present only in people who had MECFS that started as a result of an infection, but not with people who had MECFS that started with a different onset. So that immediately gives you some very specific, in my mind at least, targets towards treatments, because what potentially, again, this is all based on what we understand today, that there are some potentially changes in along the aspects of the immune system that then really become the target for a therapeutic intervention. So I think we're going to see more and more of those And those will really give us very specific ways to have an impact. So that's one area. And maybe Sadie, I'll pass it to you to see what you'd pick as a promising area. I think I have at least another one.
Keep going then. Don't worry. Keep going.
Well, the other one, and say you may want to talk more about that, is again findings from Jared Younger, who was a Ramsay recipient, and he identified through his research that there are changes within the brain. That actually there's an inflammation process that takes place in the brain, and you could measure that in different ways that he has developed. And the reason I think that's really promising, again, because it gives us some specific areas to intervene. And I just heard him present at a World Health Organization conference last week that was on the topic of long COVID, and he's now applying the same methods that he had developed for MECFS and looking at that with people with long COVID. So that could be another angle in which to really understand some of the changes. And with, if that holds true for long COVID, well, then we'll really be able to study that now and really see if there's an opportunity for intervention. So there are some areas that really has emerged as a result of the Ramsay program that really, I think, are very, very promising.
Yeah, I think that, the only one I would add, I think, is, Liz Worthy, who is doing kind of a combination of genome sequencing alongside this really deep kind of analytical number crunching thing, where she's not just looking at differences between people who do and do not have MECFS. She's looking at chronic disease overall, and that allows you to eliminate kind of just the general changes which are related to being sick, right? And so it really allows you to drill down into the very specific alterations that you might see that are, very specific for a disease. And just kind of I don't even really understand it, as you can tell, but just the deep computing and analytics approach combined with the genomic analysis just seems very compelling way to get to the truth faster.
Great. Well, we'll start with you then, Sadie, on this one, and maybe Oved will jump in too. And this question talks about the peer review process for Ramsay. And could you talk about how the process works and how the grants are chosen?
Yeah, so the process itself is blinded. And part of the reason that we did that, so it's double blinded, right? The researchers don't know who reviewed it and the reviewers don't know who submitted it. Part of the reason we wanted to blind it, a couple of reasons, right? People can be a little bit snobbish about kind of which university the research is coming from, and we didn't want to have that. And then secondly, I do think that people can kind of sometimes get married to a particular like scientific mechanism, and they think that that's the only mechanism that exists. So we double blinded it to try and get rid of any of that kind of bias, like, oh, this is coming out of this person's lab and I don't agree with their theory, or this isn't a good university. And we definitely evaluate, obviously, whether the university is equipped to be able to do the research and whether the researcher is qualified to do the research. But we didn't want to have that kind of bias in the peer review process. Every grant proposal goes out to 2 reviewers. If there is more, that there's like a rubric that people use to score the proposal based on, scientific credibility, likelihood of results that can lead to a larger grant, feasibility of the study. I can't think of all the criteria, but there's like a preset criteria. It gets peer reviewed by 2 groups, or 2 individuals. And if there's a swing in the points of more than 3 between the 2 scores, then we send it out for a 3rd review. And so that's the process. And then we get all of that feedback back and we synthesize it. And then we make recommendations to the board based on that. And then it gets verified and we give the awards. We do fairly often on both the grants that we give and the grants that we don't give, we will share the anonymous feedback. So they don't know who it's come from, but we will synthesize some key points. So on the ones that we do give, we say, hey, the feedback from the peer reviewers said you should include 5 5 extra people and do this with them, and can you revise your proposal and send it back to us before we fund it? So we will use that feedback from the peer review process to enhance the proposal. And then on ones that aren't funded, we do provide that feedback as to why it wasn't funded, and some potential changes that they could make as a way to hopefully, right, enhance their grant proposals in the future when they're seeking funding from other places. So I think that's kind of an overview. I think the last thing I'll say, and we've done a fair amount of this this year. We were finding, I mentioned that some people get really stuck on a specific theory within MECFS. We were sort of seeing these situations where one reviewer would say, this is the best proposal I've ever seen, and another reviewer would say, this is trash. And we were getting that sense of like, we needed to look outside of MECFS a little bit. So this year we have purposefully asked researchers who have expertise in the areas of science, so like in genetics or in immunology or in metabolomics, we've integrated non-MECFS researchers alongside MECFS researchers into the peer review process to try and get around some of that trickiness. And then the last thing I'll say is we do embed individuals with MECFS who have the scientific ability to review these proposals into the peer review process as well. And so we have 3 this year who are individuals with the disease who also have science PhDs who are reviewing the proposals.
Great, well, thank you. You want to add anything, Oved?
Maybe just a question, Sadie. You mentioned some of the changes for this year's cycle. What can you say on enabling people who are not necessarily associated with an academic institution or part of a university to still be recipients or participate in the Ramsay program?
Yeah, I mean, so the bench research side of it, that's hard, right? Sure. Because you need a lab. But certainly on the analysis side, we're very open to people who have the ability to conduct, if they wanted to look at the registry data and do an analysis. Yep. So we, if someone's a data scientist or has that expertise and is, maybe has a job at IBM and wants to also do, a research proposal with us, we're very open in that sense to people coming from non-traditional settings.
Great. Thank you. Those were great answers. So the next one, Mark Kimmons in as a question this time. Any work on vagal nerve stimulation might influence autonomia and also even immune system. No treatments have converged yet. So many possibilities could be considered.
Yep. So agree, Mark. We don't currently have any Ramsay programs that are looking at that right now. But it's certainly, if one were to come in, we would certainly consider it. Great. It's a great point.
Any other questions for today? Well, we did have one, Sadie. One person asked, what is an RFA?
Oh, sorry. It's a request for announcements. Or it might be anyway, it's the thing that you put out that says we are request for awards, I think it is. It's the announcement that you put out that says we have money and we'd like to give it to research. And here's this kind of research that we're looking for, and please submit your ideas. It's that.
Excellent. Well, if we have no other questions, we have one more from Paula. Paula asks, I have pretty much lost hope, but knowing the thoughtfulness of your approach, if I remove myself from disease status, this is exciting and hopeful. Well, thank you, Paula. That's really great. And again, Vicky Beth says, have you seen a spike in searches for these grants? Have you seen, that was one of your slides, in fact. If so, how is the word being spread for the Ramsay RFAs?
Yeah, so obviously we use our network, right? And we use the NIH's network. They're kind enough that the relationship we have with them, they'll forward it to their group, their research group, which is much bigger. And like I said, we also proactively reach out to people. So I mentioned the UCLA grant. We'll reach out to organizations and ask them to post it, or we'll reach out to individuals who are doing, an area of science that we think might be related to this disease, and then tell them about the RFA and ask them if they're interested in applying for a Ramsay. So an example would be, we have Dr. Bindu Paul, who is, she works at Johns Hopkins, and she works with a Nobel laureate who's researching hydrogen sulfide. One of our community had a theory that hydrogen sulfide was involved in MECFS. And so we reached out to Bindu and we encouraged her to do a Ramsay, and now she's away. So she's got an NIH grant proposal in, and she has a whole area of science within her lab that's focused on hydrogen sulfide, that's focused on the role of hydrogen sulfide in MECFS. So it's just one example of how we really try and build a network, right? We're not at a point where we're stuck on one area of science. What we're trying to do is take a number of different possible theories and approaches and bring people in and keep them in the field, because I genuinely believe building that foundational workforce is what is going to turn the corner on research.
Great. We have another question from Carol, who asks, we know it's too early to narrow understanding of the cause of MECFS, but is your sense that COVID-19 will significantly speed up the understanding of ME, and why?
I think it will. And I think it will because everyone's looking at it, right? Like I think so a lot of people, or some people are worried that MECFS is going to get lost in the shuffle and long COVID takes over. And, as an organization, we won't allow that to happen, right? But what we can do is leverage the spotlight, leverage the media, the financial, government attention, all these long COVID clinics, the registry, right? The beauty of what we have in the registry is that we have an MECFS cohort group and a long COVID group, and we'll be able to directly look at those two and say, what's the same and what's different? What is it that some people recover from a viral illness and some people don't? So I think it will be a significant accelerator, mainly because of the attention. People, that all eyes are on it. It's kind of an exciting is the wrong word, but people are focused on it. And I think you see that in the number of applications, I think, that we've had this year, right? 87% increase. It feels that can't just be as a result of, our extended outreach. I'm sure part of it is to do with the increased attention on these, long-term chronic conditions.
Thank you. I have a private question for Oved. Oved, one attendee asks, what are you most excited about in the road ahead for Solve ME?
Wow, that's a great question. I think that really, obviously this has been a challenging year for everyone around the world. But as just to continue on what Sadie was just saying, I think that this intense focus on a post-viral disease like long COVID does really give me the hope that with many of the insights that we begin to see in terms of an immune response, how is an immune response changed in some people, and how is it different from those who recover more quickly? I think I have a very high hope that this will translate into insights and treatments within really the near term. I think this is just a very, very different situation from what we've witnessed probably for our generation. And I think the kind of the sad part is that we had done our work as we now do, 30 years ago, perhaps we would have been better equipped with tools and treatments to prevent this additional suffering from long COVID. But nevertheless, we now have the opportunity to do that. So I really do think that we're going to see some breakthroughs coming up very, very, very soon. And it's that's really going to be a very would have the support of the NIH, would have the support of other funding agencies, and ultimately I think that there will be more interest also on the biotech side to look into that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we're going to see some major breakthroughs coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, just to come back to, Carol's question about long COVID. So I've been with the organization 3 years now, and in the last 6 months, we've been approached by 4 different pharmaceutical companies or biotech startups who are interested in our registry. You know, some of it is we haven't had a registry to date, but some of it is, you know, they're interested in long COVID. And so our job really is to say, yeah, we've got this registry data set. We've also got MECFS, and we want, if we're going to work with you, we want you to work on both halves of this puzzle and kind of see, you know, if we're going to develop a treatment, you know, what can we do it for both sides of this? So it really, I think, is a super, I feel like, again, exciting is not the right word, but it's, I feel like we're at the start of something where we're really have got this great foundation of researchers. You know, Oved mentioned Jared Younger, who's, you know, the poster child for MECFS research in some regard, is now on a, you know, WHO panel talking about long COVID. There's real opportunity, I think. We've got this spotlight, we've got this foundation, let's just grab it, right? Grab it and accelerate things. And I genuinely believe the combination of the registry, the attention on long COVID, and this Ramsay workforce that has got such, you know, now 62 people in it, and, you know, we're probably going to add another 50 in this cycle, which it just feels like we're on the start of something, you know, to take it, you know, really get to the next level. So that's what I'm most excited about.
Great. And Vicky is very excited too. Vicky Bell.
Yeah, exactly. Grab it. Exactly right. We've just, but that's the nice thing, right? You know, we've got this really solid foundation. So we've got this deep bench of MECFS researchers who can now, you know, probably get money and, you know, more easily get government grants. And so grab it, right? We've got the registry, we've got MECFS and long COVID. Let's grab that, right? Let's use that data to really accelerate what we know, and help both diseases get there quicker.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. This has really been informative and inspirational. And to close our time together, I'm going to throw it back to Oved.
Well, thank you very much, Mary Ellen and Sadie. Thanks. It's been terrific to hear more about the details of the Ramsay program. I think it's to me, it's always reassuring to know that there's a very clear process on how those grants are selected. And I will just close by having, you know, we now have a new challenge. We have more applications. Sadie, I'm not going to press you to tell us if you think that they are worthy of being granted an award, but assuming that we do, we would really want to be in a position to give out more research dollars this year to the Ramsay program. So hopefully we'll be able to have the resources and continue to increase the number of programs that we support this year. And in the coming years, as we talked about, our intention is to continue to grow this program and add those type of Ramsay programs, which will be much more linked towards what we call translational medicine, meaning getting closer from the bench to the bedside. So I will just close here by thanking all of you for your support over the years. You represent a huge number of incredibly generous gifts over many years. So we're deeply we have deep gratitude for all of your support, and look forward to continue this conversation and hopefully with new discoveries to talk about.